The Intellectual Gentlemen's Club.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Intellectual Gentlemen's Club. I'm Jason Abbott, your host. First off, I just wanted to say thanks everybody for tuning in, or if this is your first time joining us, welcome. I'm sitting here recording the introduction in my brand new IGC hoodie. I'm happy to report that we do have some swag available now. We have two different designs that are out for t-shirts and hoodies. It's a very limited quantity run. If you guys are interested in that, you can hit up the website, intellectualgentlemensclub.com/swag. You should be able to find it there. Or if you just hit the website up at Intellectual Gentlemen's Club, you should find it right through there. This run was sponsored by I Am Detroit, so big thanks going out there to those guys. I Am Detroit Clothing has a wide variety of services they provide. You can find them at imdetroitclothing.com. Hit them up for any of your custom printing needs if you're in the area or globally. There's this wonderful thing called shipping and UPS, FedEx, all that good stuff. They'll get it to you somehow. I also want to throw a shout out to Renault Video Productions. Again, they sponsored the podcast, and very grateful for that. So thanks to our people out there. If you have any video production needs, check them out at RenaultVP.com. Putting up ratings on iTunes and Stitcher, wherever you might find us, YouTube, any kind of directories always helps for additional traffic to come through and gets other people to listen to the show, which is great. You can check out our affiliate sponsors on the support page of the website. You'll find Onnit.com products, a total human optimization company, Amazon.com, and Audible.com. You can use those links, brings you right to their portal, and anything you do through that portal gives us a little cutback for the show, helps keep the lights on and hosting costs and all that good stuff. So appreciate any time you guys can use those. It's been an interesting couple weeks. I'll be releasing podcasts on a monthly basis now just because there's so much stuff going on. I wish I had more time and wish I could talk to more people. It's become an impossibility in my life at this point. So I'm glad I can still get one out a month. I'm still being able to talk to amazing people and get you guys some good content. This podcast is releasing at the end of November 2015. This is right after the Paris attacks, and there's been a lot of coverage on news, alternate media, social media. It's been all over the place. ISIS is a big issue. We do cover ISIS in this podcast. Typically, people think of it as an Islamic-based religion, but as I talked with Steve here on the podcast, I'm finding out that it's more of a cult than anything else. It's an ideology behind things, and once we get involved in this conversation, you probably will figure out what I'm talking about. I read Steve Hassan's book, Combating Cult Mind Control, and it gave me a much deeper understanding of what a cult really is. I encourage you to check it out on paperback or on e-readers. I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. Stay tuned at the end. We'll have some new music. And as always, thanks for listening, guys. Welcome back to the Intellectual Gentlemen's Club, everyone. Today, I want to welcome back my co-host and brother, Matthew Abbott.
Hello.
Without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest for today. He's one of the foremost authorities on cults and mind control. He has a master's degree in counseling psychology. He's pioneered a new approach to helping victims of mind control called the Strategic Interactive Approach, and has helped thousands of people victimized by mind control and cults. He's a survivor of the Unification Church, which you might know of as the Moonies, and a multiple-time author and founder of Freedom of Mind website. Stephen Hassan, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks. You got my name mostly pronounced correctly, so that's a miracle.
What's the proper pronunciation?
Hassan.
Hassan. Okay.
Yeah, it's an Americanization of my great-grandfather who came from Latvia, and it was Hassan and whatever. But I'm not Middle Eastern, and I'm Jewish, and And anyway, everyone mispronounces it. So thank you for mostly getting it good.
Well, apologize, but you're welcome. All right. So I reviewed your book, Combating Cult Mind Control. It was a fascinating read for me. It took me about a week to get through it. Some of it was difficult to integrate. My wife was complaining how I was getting pissed off every night reading it. And just some of the tactics in there really kind of blew my mind. I was just speaking with you. I thought I knew a little bit about cults before, but I'm nowhere near an expert, but I feel I'm very much more informed now than I was a couple weeks ago, even after hearing you on Joe Rogan. So
yeah, thank you. It's not an easy read in the sense that it's not an escapist novel or anything like that. It's really talking about real people, real politics, real events that are affecting global policy and governments and legal system and everything else. So, but it's I wrote the first edition of it in 1988 in hardback and 1990 in paperback, and I finally was able to get the rights back, buy the rights back. And it really is a substantial, revision update, because when I wrote it, there was no internet, and I was doing 3-day interventions, voluntary interventions as the primary mode. And everything is shifted with smartphones and GPSs and texts and websites and Facebooks. And cult recruitment has gotten more sophisticated, and the media has been threatened to be sued. So there's really very little being told responsibly on any major networks or any normal channel.
What would be a good channel or news source from you that you could tell the listeners about?
Yeah, we were talking about earlier, like, we don't know what to believe.
Yeah.
Especially going through this, like, all the propaganda that's involved with all these different organizations, like, infiltrating our media and whatnot, like you just said. Like, we don't even know who to trust anymore, even, like, day-to-day news.
So, for example, my former cult, you mentioned the Moonies. A lot of people don't know that the Moonies own the Washington Times newspaper in D.C., It's never made money. It's like over 25 years in existence. Over $2 billion has been poured into this, essentially to promote a right-wing agenda and for influence purposes. And what people don't know also is that they owned a video broadcast facility that every major network was renting, because they made it so cheap that it was cheaper for them to rent it from the Moonies. But that gave the Moonies a lot of influence over them. And virtually since they got the paper going, even though the founding editor left and said the Koreans are manipulating the stories, and the editorial page editor left, with all of that, people are still in the dark. They think it's an independent newspaper because they pay a lot of money to people who are not believers to advance this right-wing agenda. So, I mean, I could go on and on, but you asked about responsible media. There's the Center for Investigative Reporting is probably the best place in the country. That basically they're a nonprofit, and they're not, beholden to advertisers, and they get, philanthropic monies. And I guess, I don't think that they sell subscriptions, but it's just, they're dedicated to doing investigative journalism with the public good being the highest virtue, as opposed to, how can I tell a sexy story, sensationalize it, spin it, give no content at all that's going to be meaningful to change people's lives, which is 90% of the media, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's very, very frustrating. I can't tell you how many times I've been interviewed for an hour or two, and I'll be put on network for 30 seconds or less with the most sensationalist sentence.
That's how they do it, right?
And it's just, and I got to the point where I realized, wait a minute, the internet exists. I have a camera. I have all these fabulous friends who are former members, former leaders of all these groups. I'm going to sit them down with a camera and like really on the cheap, like literally set up a tripod in my hotel room and sit and chat with them. So I put up like 100 free videos about everything from TM, Transcendental Meditation, which the David Lynch Foundation, the filmmaker David Lynch, has been using celebrities like Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney to promote TM, even though they left TM and they knew that Maharishi was screwing women, you know, and John Lennon wrote Sexy Sadie about Maharishi, I was told. But anyway, they're doing the spin on TM now, and they're even getting it into school system in California to teach little kids.
What's the spin called? Is it a different name than TM?
It's David Lynch Foundation, but it's for example, here's an example. A German filmmaker named David Siviking, who I just met in Berlin when I was there visiting friends over the summer, made this incredible documentary called David Wants to Fly. And he loved David Lynch. He became a TMer, and he was a filmmaker, so he started videotaping everything. And somewhere in the middle of the doc, he started realizing there's a whole other side to this thing. There are these former members.
Kind of how it works, right?
They're selling $1 million, gold crowns, and there's a whole nother thing here. So, and the documentary is really, really solid, but he can't get a distributor in the United States.
Shocking.
And you can't see this documentary anywhere in the United States. And it's like, this really stinks. This is a good documentary. The public should know it. So I'm on a quest. If there's any distributor out there listening to this podcast, check out this documentary. We'll send the DVD.
There you go.
And let people watch it and make up their own minds. I mean, it's told in a entertaining way, but it's factual. And I'll mention another, TonyOrtega.org. Tony was the editor of the Village Voice and got into covering stories on Scientology, and he's recently published a book about a friend of mine, Paulette Cooper, called The Unbreakable Miss Lovely. But it's his site is where everyone goes to break news. When a celebrity wants to leave, that's where you find out about it first.
Okay.
If somebody's doing some investigation or suing one of their friend groups like Narcanon, which claims to help people get off of drugs, they go to Tony's site, and then it disseminates into the media from there. So that's another thing. Of course, I have my site, freedomofmind.com, and my Facebook, but I'm a small operation here. I have a lot of people who love my work and support my work, but I wish I had a staff of 100. I could get a lot more done.
I'm sure. One thing that I had this reoccurring theme when I was reading your book, and I couldn't shake the fact that when I was a younger kid, I was, I guess, brought up in a Catholic house. We weren't like totally serious about it or whatnot, but we went to church, we went to catechism and stuff like that, and it was always like this thing that we never really wanted to do. But I can't help but know or to see these similarities with cults and religion. I know that you primarily deal on undue influence, and a lot of people come to religion, and there's control mechanisms that I'm sure you'll discuss here with your system. But what differentiates a destructive cult from a religion? I guess that's my main question.
So I'm going to take the liberty of quoting my own book and show if it's visible.
Yep. Mm-hmm. We're just on audio only, but I might be able to put something up.
Well, you can
put up a picture of it.
Yeah,
it's on page 92 of the paperback of Combating. It's called The Influence Continuum.
Perfect.
And if you look, the arrow going to the left is what I call constructive, ethical, social influence. And the arrow to the right is destructive, unhealthy, undue influence.
Mm-hmm.
So on the left, it talks about things like respecting the uniqueness of a person and their individuality and their free will and that they should be able to have free access to information. And that's about leadership that's honest and trustworthy and accountable and transparent, and organizations that have informed consent and checks and balances and encourages growth. So that's the ideal left side. The right side is about censorship, control of people, pressure to make them think the right way, feel the right way, act the right way.
But couldn't you say that about the Catholic Church? I mean, all those things, yeah.
Of course one could say that about any institution, especially at different points of history.
True.
I mean, it was 1962 when the Catholic Church declared Jews were not Christ killers.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a revelation for a lot of people because they were teaching it for, 1800 years or whatever. And it caused a lot of anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Needless to say, being a Jew. Not to mention, suppressing scientific research and suppressing women and we could go on and on and on. That said, I'm loving this new Pope. I'm not joining the Catholic Church, but I'm really liking what he's able to do in a short period of time with an archaic institution that has done a lot of good work. They have a lot of charities that do good work, but they've also harmed people a lot. Of course, with the sexual abuse conspiracy, it was broken in Boston, which is where I live, and there's a lot of survivors who are still suffering to this day from that abuse. I might also add that on my website I have an interview with a former priest of the Catholic Church, John Lennon, believe it or not, Paul Lennon, Paul John Lennon. He was in a group called the Legionaries of Christ, which was sanctified by the Pope as a great group within the Catholic Church, but the guy was a molester, and it was a full-fledged mind control cult.
Yeah,
within the Catholic Church. I've heard from people who were in Opus Dei talking about their secrecy, their power, their control, and such. And look, I'm more interested in helping the human species survive and evolve. And so I'm more interested in raising consciousness and awareness than just pointing fingers and saying, these people are bad, stay away from them, or this group is bad, stay away from them. I'm more really trying to illuminate everyone about the fact that we are unique beings, and however you want to understand God, we're not clones. We're not, we need to express our own uniqueness. It's part of the evolution of biology. And we need to coexist on one planet. So we need to find a way to overcome our differences and find commonalities and help feed each other and take care of each other and keep our planet going for the next generations.
So when you're talking about people in general, the human race, it seems to me that the masses view of mind control has a heavy stigmatization to it. What can be done to destigmatize that? Because you yourself, just hearing your story, you were an intelligent guy going to college, and you just kind of got wrapped up in this world, and before you knew it, you were recruiting people yourself using the same tactics that you felt that were deceptive. So how do people fall into this trap? Is it something that the upbringing does? Is there different catalysts that bring it together, or can anybody pretty much fall victim to this?
Well, that's a different question than the one you started asking. Like, how can we destigmatize people's, emotional judgments about people who get into destructive cults? And I guess I first want to just state that cults come in all shapes and sizes and forms and contents. So it could be a cult of one person, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, who completely takes you over. You can't have your own bank account. You can't have, a night out with a friend without him, asking a billion questions or whatever. It could be a therapy relationship with a therapist who is keeping you dependent instead of doing what they're supposed to do, which is help you be functional and get out of therapy. It could be a business, a corporation or a multi-level marketing group. It could be a religious cult. It could be a large group awareness training that's going to help you transform your life and change your being. So it can come in many shapes and sizes. The way that my approach to destigmatizing it is basically I'm trying to role model,
well
not
done, sir.
putting my head between my tail and being embarrassed and not telling anyone, but just writing books about it, doing interviews about it, and encouraging other people who want to be public about it, particularly celebrities and top CEOs of corporations are slowly starting to speak out that, yeah, I was in a cult. And hopefully it will be like sex abuse, if you were a kid in a sex abuse, more people are just saying, yeah, it happened to me, instead of tiptoeing around it.
Right.
But, essentially, the short answer of, who's vulnerable, the answer is anyone is vulnerable if you're breathing and have a sense of self where you want to learn or you want to grow or you want to, be important to yourself or somebody else or to a world cause. And that's the other thing. If you care about others, whether you want to help the climate change problem or you want to take care of other people or whatever. So it appeals to people who are, smart, talented, educated, ambitious, motivated. Cult recruiters do not want homeless people who are drug addicts, because it takes a lot of time and money and energy and attention to minister to them. They want people from middle class, upper middle class.
They want to extract rather than give, right?
Yeah. So, and then, we can talk about trafficking cults of, pimps are preying on 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds to turn them into sex slaves to make them a fortune. We can talk about terrorist groups like ISIS and all their deceptive recruitment. The key is, in my experience, is nobody joins a cult. You get deceptively recruited, often at a vulnerable moment in your life. In my case, my girlfriend had dumped me. I was an upper junior at Queens College, and 3 women were flirting with me, pretending to be students. And I never was a joiner, so I would never dawn on me that they were in a cult and I was going to join a cult eventually or be recruited into a cult. But it's this incremental, systematic social influence campaign. And a lot of it's using what's known as hypnosis or altered states of consciousness techniques, which is very much in the marketplace. It's all over the internet. And people who know about it have an unfair advantage over people who don't know about it. So that's another piece of my work, is to educate everybody so we can equalize the playing field. And we are our brother's keeper. In this case, you have a brother sitting in the room with you, but I mean, your sister, your buddies, your friends, your family. We should watch out for each other. We should, know enough about what's going on in their lives. If some stranger starts spending a lot of time with them, we should want to know what's happening. Or if they're spending an inordinate amount of hours on the computer late at night, what are they doing? You know?
Yeah. You mentioned a few minutes ago just about ISIS. I did want to get into that because I had no idea that it was kind of labeled as a cult. You just see it as a quote-unquote terrorist organization. That's what the media portrays it as. And that's another thing my brother and I were discussing. I was like, who do you believe about ISIS? Like right now, Russia is bombing, ISIS, and they're saying that it was created by the U.S. with all the funding that was brought to the Middle East. It's like, this is so twisted up, and you're getting it from so many different positions.
Yeah,
But where do you believe?
Times, on the other hand, saying, everything's fine.
What I'm reading, Russia is bombing the people who are trying to unseat Assad, the dictator of Syria, instead of bombing ISIS, which they said they were going to bomb ISIS. So we're in a pickle because we don't want to commit a land, get into another land war, nor do we want to have a war with Russia. But Putin is a hardball player, and he sees a weakness, a perceived weakness. I really like a lot of what Obama has done, but there are some real gaping holes in terms of strategy. I mean, Obama just spoke in front of the United Nations and pretty much called ISIS an apocalyptic cult and said we have to beat it ideologically. But
how do you do that?
I've been speaking about this topic for 39 years. I mean, and I've been talking explicitly since 9/11 that Al-Qaeda and all these groups are pyramid-structured, authoritarian, mind control cults, and they're recruiting people and brainwashing people, and we need to use this knowledge and experience in this war. And, it's literally so frustrating for me because all the politicians, they say the word, but then they don't say, well, what does that really mean? Yeah. It's an apocalyptic cult. Well, what is a cult? And who's a cult expert? And who are the top cult experts in the world? And some of the top social psychologists in the world, like Philip Zimbardo, who taught a course at Stanford for 15 years called The Psychology of Mind Control, used 2 chapters of combating cult mind control. And when people ask him about cults, he refers people to me. Says Steve is the expert. Ask him. So I'm waiting for the disconnect to get connected of read my book at least,
Sounds like bureaucracy in motion.
Want to lead a country? Read a book on cults and understand it's not rocket science and it's not mystical. There really are behavioral variables and there really are specific strategies for how to inoculate people and how to debrief people and how to exit people. With all these refugees who are coming out, Europe is flipping out. How do we know they aren't? Some of them aren't, terrorists. And it's they need to develop educational programs that explains what cults are and what mind control is and what's twisted about the Quran, the way ISIS is teaching it versus the way 6,000 of the most respected imams in the world is teaching it. It's all doable, but I'm waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, it really does sound like a bureaucracy in motion, really. I mean, the larger the organization, the tougher it is to get in, but it just seems like it would be the first order of business to understand what's happening there. And if it's now it's in the mind of everybody, it's called a cult. Yeah, I mean, we can start to address the root problem of it, but it doesn't seem like people want to address it as a cult. When I see the news flashes on it, wherever I might see it on Twitter, Facebook, the TV or whatever, it's labeled as a Christian cult, Christian killing, Muslim organization, terrorist organization. So it's not even being broadcast clearly what this organization is. So what is it exactly? Can you narrow it down for us?
Well, I think it's a political cult using religion. They say explicitly they want to take over the world and establish an Islamist caliphate and impose Sharia law, and if you don't want to convert, they kill you. Now, in the Moon cult, go back to 1974, little Steve Hassan, who was being groomed to be a leader, I was literally told by Moon in an impromptu leadership meeting, when we take power in America, we'll amend the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people to have sex outside of the Unification Church. And if people can't withhold their sexual urges, we'll be doing a favor by taking away their physical bodies and sending them to the spirit world. And Steve Hassan said, yes, Father, to that.
Well, that was a cult personality, Steve Hassan, right?
I was educated about the Holocaust. I read, 1984. I was an English major. I read 1984, Animal Farm. I was an educated, intelligent, socially conscious, protested the Vietnam War. I was actually in the last draft lottery to go to Vietnam. So I was like ponytail up. So, I mean, if it could happen to me, and that's why I'm speaking so emphatically, it's like if it could happen to me, like I come from a very boringly normal family. Like my family lived in the same house, and my parents were virgins, and they never had affairs, and they never drank alcohol or gambled. They did smoke cigarettes for a while. But, I mean, it was a normal...
So what was the thing that sucked you in the most, then?
Huh?
What was the thing that sucked you in the most to that, then?
What drew you into...
That sucked me in the most. Yeah. It was really incremental. It was, again, I was a college student. I wanted to teach English creative writing, and it was a process of influence on my head. Part of it was sleep deprivation, part of it was information overload, part of it was hypnosis, part of it was separating me from family and friends for periods of time. But in terms of what did I believe was happening to me, I believe that God was summoning me to save the planet. Mm-hmm. Like I looked at the world as you look at the world probably in 2015 and say, holy crap, things really are grim. Mm-hmm. Global climate change, political corruption, economy's unstable. I mean, you can go through the list. I had all that same list in 1974, by the way.
Yeah, that seems to be
except back then, I thought we were going to be nuked by Russia. Honestly, that was the consciousness I was raised with, was the Soviet Union was going to nuke us.
Yeah.
So I had all those things, and here, these individuals got into my world, my face, and were like, Jason, you're special.
I feel special, right?
Jason,
I mean, that's how it works.
God is summoning you. You can go back and do your podcast and have a girlfriend and all that, but you have a mission that could change the future of humanity.
People are looking for destiny, right? I mean, we all want a purpose in life, and that's pretty much what that's praying on.
Meaning and fulfillment. And for me, it was like, I'm a guy from Queens, I'm going to write poetry. Like, what do you mean I'm going to be a world ruler? And they're like, God has a different plan for you than you even imagine. And you have to surrender, and God will, turn your life over to God, and God is going to make things happen. And, it seems, I mean, again, it's 39 years that I've been out of it, and there are actually people who are still in the moon cult that I knew when I was actually in it, and it boggles my mind that they were trapped all those years. I got to travel the world, I got to get an education, I got to get married and have a kid, and go scuba diving and play basketball and go to plays and go to movies, and they didn't. And I just feel like, using my life experiences to the max of helping the planet. I mean, I'm back to the idealism of wanting the planet to survive and wanting to make a difference.
How many people would you say you've helped over the years directly remove themselves from cults? Whether by their own volition or intervention with families. Can you even put a number to it?
100,000 throughout the world. Because my book has sold hundreds of thousands around the world in many different languages, and people have pirated the book and scanned the book, and I can't honestly calculate. But it's not enough because there are millions and millions and millions that are involved. Like even the Jehovah's Witnesses, there's 5-6 million people in one cult. That's, by the way, one of the worst pedophilic, cover-up groups.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They prevent people from having blood transfusions. Why? Because they say God says so.
It's like you hear the parents that deny, their children cancer medication because it's not in their destiny or whatever crap they use,
Yeah. So I'm actually on the board of advisors. I'm going to do a plug for one of the nonprofits that I affiliate with. I'm on the board of advisors of something called the Child Friendly Faith Project. It was started by Janet Heimlich, whose father was the Heimlich maneuver, and she wrote a book called Breaking Their Will, and I think the subtitle is Preventing Religious Maltreatment of Children. So it's all about kids need to be brought to doctors. Pray all you want, but bring it to the doctor if they got a temperature of 104 or 105. Don't hit them, don't beat them, don't torture them, saying the Bible says I have to in order to love you. Like, corporal punishment is really, really horrendous. And protect them from pedophiles. Like, if someone's a pedophile, report them to the police. It's your civic duty.
Yeah. But they just sweep that shit right under the rug, don't they?
In the Jehovah's Witnesses, they have a 2-witness rule that unless 2 adults witness an adult having sex with a kid, if the kid, has, bleeding from orifices and crying, that doesn't count. You need 2 adults. So I was told that they have a list of 23,000 pedophiles at headquarters, and that was like
Jesus Christ.
Years ago.
That's really sick.
It's really sick. Really sick. What's good is that these people are now like going to courts and winning $1 million judgments. That is beginning to ring some bells to the leadership that, wait a minute, maybe we should have new light and have a revelation that, if somebody has sex with a kid, they should be reported to the police.
See, this is kind of a trick. It gets into this tricky world, too, where, the cults can say, well, you're persecuting my freedoms, right? This is a country of religious freedoms, and, we're just practicing what we need to do. So then it puts in this, well, okay, we're getting into this argument now where how can we can there be any laws passed or any legislation that can? So what can happen?
So freedom of religion doesn't mean license to commit crimes.
Sure.
People need to understand that. You can believe whatever wacky crap you want to believe, but if you're doing a criminal act, you can't say, "Oh, I'm doing it. It's part of my church, and therefore it's okay." Mm-hmm. So, you read my book, in chapter 12, I'm talking about we need to update the legal system to understand undue influence, to have real criteria for evaluating undue influence, which exists, and to stop giving a license to break laws to nonprofit groups. Nonprofit groups exist because I pay taxes. And they get benefits. If they want benefits to be nonprofit, they need to uphold basic human rights and they need to not break laws of the land. And if they are systematically lying to people when they recruit, they need to lose their nonprofit status. Yeah. So I'm for repealing Scientology's nonprofit status as a religion. They want to believe they're a religion, great. But why should we give them all that benefit of all that real estate that we should be getting tax money off of while they're ripping off, people's lives?
Speaking of Scientology, I watched Going Clear when it came out on HBO a few months ago, and holy shit, I was infuriated by the end of the film. Just that it was allowed to blackmail to get their to get their nonprofit status, and that it just happened. Like there was no outcry, there was no worries about it. They're just like, just
crying. I was yelling and screaming, but no, it was dirty. It was all very digging up dirt on IRS commissioners, doing lawsuits,
personal lawsuits,
commissioners. They did a very, very orchestrated campaign. They owed over $1 billion to the U.S. government in unpaid taxes, and they basically paid lobbyists and did a dirty, behind the counter deal.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And then we know David Miscavige, the head of Scientology, has been using money to pay PIs to follow his own father for decades, like millions of dollars.
Yeah.
This is money that people have donated to a tax-free church, and he's using PIs to harass former members and even his own father.
I mean, they've been notorious for that. Anybody who has any dissent to the organization, it's called, what's it called, fair game? They just go after them. And
well, you're talking to someone who's an SP. I'm a suppressive person.
I'm sure about that. How do you deal with all that?
Yeah, and fair game. Well, it stinks.
Have you been personally attacked by them at all?
I've been sued, I've been followed, I've been picketed, they've gone through my garbage, they've said bad things to all my neighbors, that I'm a criminal. Relative to former leaders who've left, I've gotten off easy. But then again, they know that my life work isn't fighting Scientology. My life work is fighting all different cults. And I've had it various times when people from their Gestapo part of their group, called the Office of Special Affairs, which used to be called the Guardian's Office, when they would get into my face threatening me, I would just turn it around on them and more or less say, now I want you to listen very carefully. And I know that they have to file a security report back whenever they talk to an SP, so I know that they're really listening. And I say, I really want you to listen to what I'm about to say. And they're like, and I'm like, understand, the cult that I was in, the Moonies, the CIA set up the Korean CIA, and the founder of the Korean CIA said that he organized and utilized the Moonies for use as a political tool. And this group has billions of dollars. It's way bigger than Scientology. And if Moon ever takes over the world like they say they will abolish Scientology in a heartbeat. So you need to keep me safe.
That's hilarious.
You get it? You get it? And they're like, got it. And I'm like, have a nice day.
Oh man, that's some good reverse psychology there, sir.
Well, it's understanding that preservation of the cult is
paramount, right?
Number one thing. Fall on a sword. You claim that you did everything to protect your central figure or your leader when you're in a mind control cult. And when it comes to saying, well, my former cult's bigger than your group, and et cetera, is it really in their best interest to put me out of business?
Right.
If there's a bigger threat to their organization, it doesn't.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend type of deal?
No, they're not my friends, and they know I'm not their friends. And whenever they threaten me, I go out of my way to do an extra thing on media just to underscore that point. But in the big picture, there are more dangerous things out there to their existence than one person, me.
I just wanted to touch on one more thing before I let you go. I know you're a busy guy, and I want to let you get back to your life here. In the book, you say that you cannot provide definite proof, but that you have a strong conviction that the Unification Church was directly caused by the CIA and MK Ultra type of stuff. Can you go over some of the government mind controls programs that you're aware of?
Well, there are two books that are kind of the first major two books on the subject. One was called The Search for the Manchurian Candidate by John Marks, and the other one was The Mind Manipulators by Alan Shefflin. And Alan is an attorney. He's an emeritus professor from Santa Clara Law School, and he literally filed all the FLYA, suits. Unfortunately, most of the data had been destroyed. They just happened to miss a whole bunch of boxes in some other facility so they were able to reconstruct some of this stuff. But that included hypnosis, LSD, electroshock stuff, Cameron. There's a video online from an ABC, I think it was, special in 1979 on mind control, and it interviewed John Gettinger, who was the head psychologist of the CIA. So that's factual and real, etc. All I can tell you that's factual is that there was a congressional subcommittee investigation from 76 to 78 looking into two defectors from South Korea. One was a South Korean embassy official, one was a KCIA agent, who said, my government has a plan for covert operations in your country, and they had the actual plans and so there was this whole congressional subcommittee investigation, and during that investigation, which I read eventually, and I was part of that investigation actually, because I was out of the Moonies at that time, they interviewed the founder of the Korean CIA, and it was his quote that I quoted, that, more or less he organized the Unification Church for use as a political tool. What was happening in the Cold War was essentially, and North Korea still is North Korea, it has not changed in terms of brainwashing and mind control. What was happening in South was that there were coups that were taking. It was very unstable, and in the Cold War, America was really worried about post-Korean War. So some genius thought, you know what, this unstable political situation in South Korea is really bad for us. So we should help them set up their own intelligence agency, which apparently the U.S. has done with lots of countries, taught them how to do it. And of course, when you teach them how to do it, you're also installing your own people and your own hardware and everything else into the infrastructure of whatever that country is. And the Moonies were essentially used to counter brainwash people who thought that they should overthrow the South Korean government, to help them understand the facts as they saw it, that North Korea was a bigger threat. And so we needed a stable government structure in South Korea. And it was only when America was leaving Vietnam and during Watergate that some geniuses said, well, let's bring them to the U.S. and let's try to counter this communist anti-Vietnam War movement and set up campus clubs saying we need a strong military stance, to fight the commies. And my friend Alan Wood actually was given cash, I think it was, by Charles Colson, who was working for Richard Nixon at the time. I should tell you that I fasted for Nixon to be president.
This is after you protested the Vietnam War.
I hated Nixon prior to being in the Moonies, but then I'm in the Moonies, and God wants Nixon to be president.
You mentioned in the book that that's when your dad really understood that you had been brainwashed, right?
Well, and that was the joke, because he supported Nixon, I supported McGovern. I kept telling him at dinner, Dad, he's a crook. How can you stand to, want to vote for him or whatever? And then I'm in the cult being told God wants Nixon to be president, thinking my father's gonna like it. And when I said, Dad, God wants Nixon to be president, he was like, Steve, you are right. He's a crook. Like, Dad, you don't understand. God wants him to be president. And he said, now I know you're brainwashed. The guy's a crook. I said, Dad, you just don't understand.
Yeah, he probably couldn't. Yeah, he couldn't understand, I'm sure. What was it like after you had your intervention, coming back to your family? Was it like, you describe it in the book a little bit, but was it like all of the sudden type of awareness, like, oh my God, I here I am again. I can see the light, or was it slowly you were coming out of that?
No, I actually had a deprogramming. It started involuntarily. It became voluntary. And when it became voluntary, it wasn't because I had doubts or I wanted to leave. I actually wanted to prove to my parents I wasn't brainwashed. So I kind of like took their challenge that I would talk with these, former members for 5 days, and then they would drive me back to the group. But I literally had an epiphany. I had this surreal experience where I felt like, my mind was opening up and I was able to start thinking again. And it was very emotional. It was very overwhelming. And I started crying for hours. And I didn't know what real was anymore. It was like, I believed this with all my heart and all my soul, and it was real, but it's not real. And if it's not real, then who am I, and what did I think I was just doing for the last 2.5 years?
Now, in the book, you mentioned that you don't like the word deprogramming. I don't know if there's the stigma that's involved with it, or it can be harmful to the mind. You came up with the strategic interactive approach, which is a little bit easier on the mind coming out of it. What's the difference between deprogramming and your approach, primarily?
So, I mean, when in the 70s, a guy named Ted Patrick is the guy who coined the term, and he would do involuntary interventions and get people in a motel room and pretty much be hardcore with them. You're in a cult, Jason. Wake up. Think for yourself. You're just allowing them to think, for you and whatever. And the analogy that one of his proteges once said to me, he said, Steve, the mind is like a pot of beans. You have to put the lid on and turn the heat up real high. When the top blows off, then you can put new things in it. That was his analogy for the mind.
For the brain.
Obviously, having been on the receiving end, that is not a healthy thing. And you have all these phobias in your mind that if you leave the group, you're going to be possessed by evil spirits. You're going to go insane. You're going to get cancer. You can't imagine being out of the group and happy and fulfilled. So over time, as I became a mental health professional, through trial and error and doing a million different cases, I've just evolved. I realized the way to help someone get out is a respectful, loving, ethical influence campaign, where instead of trying to tell people what to think or what to do, you're asking them questions in a respectful way.
You're going towards their intellect instead of their belief system, right?
It's emotional too, in the sense of families have love, and they love the person's authentic self, and they can say, I see you in this group, but I feel like, you have so much more that you could be doing, your artwork, your poetry, your love for humanity, that there's more there that you really owe to yourself. And of course, the cult member would then, repeat the cult ideology. But it's a fundamental assumption that I have, that deep down inside, people want to be free, and people don't like to be lied to and abused and manipulated. And that all of these unethical cults, if you peer past the ideology to what is actually happening, that nobody wants to be in that.
Yeah,
it's not positive.
It's our undying human emotion to be free, right?
Well, I mean, I think the emotion, if I was going to name any one emotion, is love. And that we want to be loved for our essence, and not just loved if we do, get $300 a day selling flowers, or we get 3 new recruits a week. We want to be loved for our beingness and accepted. And it when somebody genuinely cares about you versus just, love bombing you and flattering you, and the minute you're not agreeing with them, they drop you like a cold potato. That becomes really evident over time, whether someone's a genuine friend or, if a family member genuinely loves you or not.
Well, Steve, thank you very much. Matt, do you have anything to add, or any additional questions or anything like that?
That was good.
It's fascinating.
Cool. I just invite people to check out freedomofmind.com, our Facebook pages. I'm on Twitter at Cult Expert. And thanks for reading my book and helping, tell people about it. And hopefully more people will pick up a copy and read it on ebook or paperback.
Yeah, I loved it. And in the book, too, it also talks about specific events and people who have gotten out, people that you have helped over the years, and the realizations that they've come to, and kind of the whole process about removing somebody from a harmful cult. So,
yep.
Stephen,
and we
thank you very
talk
much.
about people born into cults. We talk about the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and TM. We talk about trafficking victims. Sex trafficking is another area that people just haven't connected the dots, that pimps write manuals on how to brainwash the hoes, and that it's a commercial cult phenomenon. So hopefully people will read it, and maybe if you're into being an activist, you'll get involved.
Yeah, sounds good. People read the book, Combating Cult Mind Control. It's available through freedomofmind.com. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon and anywhere else. So get your hands on it.
Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. Thanks a lot, Jason. Take care. Nice to meet you, Matt.
Yeah, you too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
All right, now that we've disturbed your peace and quiet with cults, why don't you guys check out Steve's book, Combating Cult Mind Control. You heard us talk about the undue influence, deprogramming, the strategic interactive approach, types of different cults, and of course, good old ISIS in the books here. Where do we go from here? I don't know. You guys have to do your own research and figure out what exactly you think about everything. There's 100,000 different people out there telling everybody what ISIS is or what ISIS isn't. And of course, with all these different religions and borderline cults or whatever, it's difficult to make your way through the world with so much information bombarding you on a daily basis. So you really have to do your due diligence, check out different things. I encourage you to listen to different podcasts. It seems to be the most honest knowledge that I get. There's really no bullshit that's involved with it as far as alternate agenda and things like that, in my opinion. So it depends on the podcast you listen to, of course, but food for thought. Head on over to the website, intellectualgentlemansclub.com. Check out our support page. Check out our swag. Get you guys some T-shirts, some hoodies, whatever you guys think you can do to help out. And then we have that delicate PayPal button for our really generous folks out there. Please check out Steve's stuff at Freedom of Mind. And check us out on social media with Facebook, Twitter. You can just do a search for us, Intellectual Gentlemen's Club. We are at IGCcast on Twitter. Find us on YouTube. Tweet out the episode. Share it on Facebook. Get the word out, people. We need more ladies and gentlemen out there. Again, I want to thank I Am Detroit and Renault Video Productions for the sponsorships. Season 3 continues. We have more people on the books coming up. We have martial artists. We have philosophers. We have all kinds of cool humans on deck here. Our intro music, of course, is brought to you by Secrets. And our exit music today is brought to you by Mountains. They have the abbreviation of MTNS. Find them on iTunes. The track is called Fears. Don't let fear control your life, people. Get out there and live. Stare death in the face. Until next time, hang loose out there, guys.
Fuck that blue pill.
Fuck that blue pill.
I never said I was a gentleman,
Actually,
motherfuckers.